Brooklyn residents will soon be voting for a new district attorney. You'll recall that the previous district attorney, who has been on this program, passed away. In this program, 3 attorneys have joined me to tell you why he or she should be the next Brooklyn district attorney. Mark Fleidner, Pat Gatling, and Ann
Swern.
Welcome to Brooklyn 45.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. It's very good.
Usually, I tell our viewers who our guests are. I'm going to do things a little different this time. I'm going to have you tell our viewers who you are. So, Ann, we're going to begin with you.
Thank you, Professor. Good evening. I am Ann Swern, and I'm running for Brooklyn District Attorney. And the reason I'm running for Brooklyn District Attorney is I love Brooklyn. And I want to ensure confidence in the system. I want Brooklynites to feel proud of their system, and I know how to deliver that kind of confidence in a system. I was a prosecutor for 33 years. Then I went to the public defender's office where I was managing counsel, which is very unique. Most people, almost nobody goes from prosecution to public defense, and nobody manages that office. It tells you a lot about me. It tells you that I was a really fair prosecutor, and it tells you that I have a really expansive view of justice. I'm also, like you, a professor of law at Brooklyn Law School, and all of those experiences are diverse. They are expansive, and they inform the way I will run the office. And that means that when I talk about the big issues involving criminal justice, the issues of over-incarceration, the issues of disproportionate contact of minorities in the criminal justice system, the issues of injustices to special populations like immigrant populations or sexual assault victims, that not only do I know how to identify the problems, I have specific agenda how to solve those problems. And I teach a course at Brooklyn Law School called Problem Solving Justice. And what I say to the students is that if you don't name the problem, you'll never solve the problem. And it's not for others to tell a community or the system or the court system or the prosecutors or the defense what the problem is. I think collectively everybody gets together, discusses what the issues are, and then comes to a solution that works for everybody. And when I was in the DA's office, I did created and ran drug court, mental health court, and many of those problem-solving therapeutic approaches to criminal justice to keep people out of the system who shouldn't be in the system at all. If they were charged properly, that they should be held accountable with something that could prevent them from coming back to the system at all. And of course, people who are dangerous do deserve to go to jail or prison, but that's a small group of people, and it's an art and a science to figure out who is dangerous and who can hurt us and who can't.
Ann Swern, thank you very much.
Thank you,
Mark
Professor.
Fleidner.
Yes, hello. Thank you for having us, Professor. I left the office after 30 years having worked on both sides of the criminal courtroom last June because I was terribly concerned that the office had lost its way, that decisions were being made based upon politics and some really kind of crudely political concepts instead of this focus, which is what a prosecutor needs to do, on all of the human beings that come with each fact pattern, the victims of the crimes, the witnesses to the crimes, and of course the rights of those that are accused and their families. And I went to just start a little civil rights firm. I had been running the Civil Rights Bureau. I was handling hate crimes and the police misconduct matters. And I stepped away from not only that office, but the system, because it became very clear to me that the system truly is broken. And it needs to be rethought from the ground up. There are so many aspects of the criminal justice system that have for generations and generations been keeping certain folks, particularly young people of color, down and robbed of futures that they need to have access to, and we can do better. The 3 primary concerns that I have that are the focus of my platform are bail reform, which results in young people, particularly young people of color, being held pre-trial, sometimes before even pre-indictment, when they are simply there because they can't raise some cash bail. Secondly, true alternatives to incarceration so that we are addressing mental health issues and substance abuse issues, and we are not blindly, like zombies, feeding this for-profit prison industrial complex that we've been feeding for so long and robbing young lives of futures. And lastly, a focus on police misconduct. I was doing that work during my time as the civil rights chief, and we were doing good work, and that work has stopped in Brooklyn. It needs to continue because as I've traveled around this year, focusing on what people need, they're greatly concerned about what happens when police and other public officials are not held accountable. I have practical ideas, but I'm deeply optimistic that Brooklyn can be the place where we achieve equal justice with real systemic change and inform the national conversation on criminal justice issues.
Thank you, Mark Fleidner.
Yes.
And Pat Gatling.
Well, it's good to be here, Professor. Yes, I too was in the office for many years in the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office. I started my career there. I was there and I was a prosecutor and a narcotics prosecutor in the 90s when the Brooklyn we see today is not the Brooklyn that we had in the 90s. And so I tackled those drug dealers and major drug dealers. And while I was in the office, most of the community-based programs that we know of are the programs that I began. When we talk about Begin Again, well, that was my Amnesty Day program. When we talk about gun buyback, when we talk about community law schools, because I really believe that justice has to work hand in hand with the community. And I tell everyone, I'm running to restore legitimacy to the criminal justice system. And when I say legitimacy, I mean fairness, integrity, transparency, and equity. And experiences and perspectives are important. And so while I was a prosecutor for 14 years, I was the longest serving human rights commissioner in the city of New York. And so I became a civil rights lawyer, and that's probably one of the oddest things that's happened, I think, that here this prosecutor became a civil rights lawyer. And so I have two different perspectives, and perspective and experience are important to accomplish a goal. And the goal is bringing about legitimacy and systemic change and dealing with systemic discrimination. So not only do I want bail reform, I want to talk about charging reform. I want to talk about discovery reform, sentencing reform, and prosecutorial reform. And by that, I mean prosecutor integrity. And one of the big programs I started in the district attorney's office, because the way I view a prosecutor is a community lawyer. And so that means we prevent crime, we deal with recidivism, and to me that was reentry. I started a reentry program in the district attorney's office in 1999 to help men and women who are returning home from prison to our community, and it's still going on to this day. And then at the back end, we've got to make sure that people are not wrongfully convicted. And how we do that is we have a prosecutor's integrity bureau that's going to monitor lawyers, that's going to monitor cases, and that's going to handle all of these sort of mishaps that may occur in a prosecutor's office. And we have to keep an eye on that.
People are not voting, and you have an election coming up very, very soon. People are going to come up to vote. You hope.
Yes.
One problem why people are not voting is because they see the name district attorney, they perhaps watch some television programs, but they don't know what you do, except for those people who are confronted with people like yourselves. What you talk about reform, what needs reform, and what do you mean by presenting a reform platform? And either of you can begin.
Well, when I talk about reform, it's more than, reform doesn't really encompass it enough. The criminal justice system is broken. And, most people, we recognize that. So it's how do you fix that, and how do you explain to the public that prosecutors and law and order and justice are connected to social progress? Dr. King said that. He said law and order exists for justice. And without law and order, that it's sort of the dam. There's a dam that stops social progress, and they're directly connected. And so during the campaign, I'm trying to, people who have no dealings with the district attorney understand that this is about social progress for our community. This is not only about making Brooklyn District Attorney's Office a model of justice. I mean, we've always been a progressive office. There have always been a lot of alternative sentencing programs and working with communities and these kinds of, but programs aren't enough to fix systemic problems. Programs are necessary, but we've got to talk about systemic and institutionalizing justice and mechanisms that are going to ensure that all these black and brown men who are in jail, more men now are in jail than there were slaves during the beginning of the Civil War, how we're going to deal with that, how we're going to prevent that, how we're going to starve out Rikers.
I truly believe that folks are going to come out to vote, and I'll tell you why. Because post this presidential election that has achieved results that are of such great concern to everybody that I talk to in Brooklyn, they realize that a focus on the issues that impact us at the local level is something that they need to be sending their energy to. Not only are they going to vote, I think they're going to help get out the vote. And if people who are concerned about the direction that our country is going, on the day, let me say, where the Attorney General fueled arm of the President's office indicated that they're going to now try and seek some affirmative action for whites in the context of the school system. We're talking about a grave problem. So that what people are going to do is they are going to acknowledge that criminal justice reform is one of those social justice issues that speaks deeply to them, not only because it impacts them, but because it impacts their sisters and brothers about whom they care. I see that caring in Brooklyn. When I talk about reform, if I can just give you one of the ways that I intend to do it. I'm sorry?
Please do.
Yes. There's a huge problem in Brooklyn right now. It's a problem throughout the nation, but particularly I know how it works in Brooklyn. At the outset, when somebody comes in handcuffs because the NYPD arrested them, there's a terrible process by which the cases are evaluated. It's woefully inadequate. Inexperienced paralegals and young assistant district attorneys without the experience of having worked the cases and being taught the constitutional issues at stake are evaluating these cases, putting them through. They're overcharged. Sometimes they're charged when they shouldn't be. The people shouldn't be charged, these kind of broken windows offenses. I don't agree with all of those and think that less should be charged. And they're not carefully evaluated, so that so many of the problems that end up with wrongful convictions and end up with people staying in jail longer than they should have are not addressed at those early stages of investigation. And social services people need to be involved at that stage so that if there is a case where the criminal conduct was driven by mental health or substance abuse or poverty or lack of access to resources, we can channel those cases in that direction before they even get to that arraignment part where a cash bail is set that keeps these people in jail.
I've been around Brooklyn for this campaign for a long time, and I've encountered many people. They are well informed. They know what the issues are. The media has been great about defining the issues for them, and so they ask me specifically, what are you going to do about immigration? What are you going to do about sanctuary cities? What are you going to do about unfairness, general unfairness and specific unfairness? And I'm happy to say to them that I have done so many specific things in the DA's office already and in the public defender's office already that I know how to effectuate change. And I'll give you an example specifically. In a post-presidential election time, the nonprofits that deal in the criminal justice system tell me that 30% of their budget is going to be reduced if the federal government does not continue to send it their way. These are the programs that provide the drug treatment. These are the programs that provide the mental health counseling. I built those programs with those partners who support me now in my candidacy, and if there's no money flowing generically to them, we will find a way to work together to keep those programs alive, because every day that a person enters the system, they deserve the highest level of justice, whether it's a victim who comes in who needs a social worker or needs support to help them through the terrible victimization or survival of a violent crime, whether it's the family members who have to support the person who survived the violence, whether it's the defendant who's in court that needs some kind of alternative sentence to prevent that person from ever coming back. Maybe that mentally ill person never got properly diagnosed. Maybe that mentally ill person never got the proper medication, and getting properly diagnosed or getting the proper medication will prevent future crime. Not only does it benefit the individual, it benefits all of us in Brooklyn. So I'm encouraged that the people in Brooklyn actually know what the issues are, and they're going to come out because they realize it does affect them, and it affects them on a small level too. Are they going to serve on juries? Are they going to participate if they're a witness to a crime? And I hope the answer is a resounding yes, and that's why I'm trying to run the campaign that educates the public to let them know why voting for the district attorney is so important to them.
People don't see you as educators, though. People see you as prosecutors.
You know, there's a fundamental problem that I've seen throughout my career. First of all, it begins with people confusing the words persecutor and prosecutor. It's happened many times. We've probably all heard it.
Prosecutrix.
Or something like that. There is this belief, and it's reinforced by dramatic television shows and things, that it's the job of the prosecutor to successfully charge, indict, and convict the person that the NYPD brought in. The job of the prosecutor is to seek true and equal justice, so that it is remarkable that we automatically go into this adversarial stance the moment that somebody comes into a courtroom, when in fact, sometimes the prosecutor's office should be working with the legal aid or Brooklyn defenders or the private bar to come up with constructive resolutions to the cases.
Is that what the DA's office is doing?
Well, I'll tell you this, that's what I did, because that's how I got hired by the public defender when I left the DA's office after 33 years. If I wasn't fair, if I wasn't approachable, if I didn't answer their questions honestly, I never would have been hired by them, and I certainly would not have been their managing counsel. So I don't know that everybody would, but if I led that office, I would make sure that everybody was respectful of all the players in the system, of the defense bar who provides information. We talk about wrongful convictions. Who's in a great position to know what an innocence defense is like? A defense attorney. Well, one of the things that I'm going to do when I'm the district attorney is to have an ombudsman, because what happens, and this is an example recently that happened in Brooklyn, a young man was on bail for $25,000. His lawyer said to the young ADA, the 911 tape will exonerate my client. He's innocent. Month one, he didn't get the tape back. Month 2, he didn't get the tape. Month 3, he didn't get the tape. It took 5 months to get that 911 tape, and finally then it showed that the client was innocent. Then he first got released from Rikers Island. This young man spent 5 months in Rikers Island, and if the ombudsman, who I would hire, reported directly to me, the minute that defense attorney did not get that tape, the next call would have been to that ombudsman, and not only would it have solved the problem for that individual defendant, a high-level person will solve that problem for all of Brooklyn's defendants, and in fact all of the city's defendants, if there's something lacking in the system that prevents us from getting exculpatory evidence quickly enough.
But to answer your question, yes, education, it is our responsibility. And I spent a lot of time when I was in the office creating programs so that we could educate young people, and by young people I mean young children in elementary school, about our system of justice. We used to have community law schools. We would bring in community leaders and people, and they would spend the day, because it's important for the people to understand the process, and so few people do. I spoke to a woman the other day who, unfortunately, her relative was one of the individuals who was shot in the head in Brooklyn. And her cry was, nobody's telling me anything, and we don't understand what's going on. But yet, you know, she's a victim. Her family has been victimized, and they had a dead child. And so it's critical to inform them, and it's critical for people to understand the process, and at an early age, not because we expect for you to come through the system, but because you need to know.
There's a feeling that low-level offenses need to be decriminalized. Can you speak to that?
Well, my list of what I guess has come to be referred to as broken windows offenses is actually very extensive. It's more extensive than is currently being implemented in the Brooklyn DA's office. Mr. Thompson, who you said you had the pleasure of interviewing, was a national leader on not criminalizing possession of a small amount of marijuana for personal use. That was a great step. It actually showed the NYPD that if the DA's office takes a stand on something, that they're going to have to comply with it, and then it had a ripple effect. But there are a lot of other crimes that I tend to refer to as survival crimes for those that don't have money, and that can include turnstile offenses and the things that we hear about. I also have great concern about offenses that go to the public health, and one of the things that concerns me is that people are arrested for things like possession of a syringe when we are trying, we are shouting at people to please be careful with the way that they use these syringes if they are in fact going through the process of some kind of a transition from substance abuse. There are a large number of basically victimless offenses that should not be processed through the system. And by the way, when they don't get processed through the system, those ICE officers that are waiting in the criminal court to arrest folks that have immigration consequences will not have their opportunity to get their hands on them.
Young people.
Yes.
There's a feeling and a fear that young people are not being treated fairly by the police or by prosecutors like yourself.
Right.
How do we fix that? How do we convince young people that they're not out there on their own? Now, we know there are some young people who are bad, but there are also young people who are not as bad. And there's a feeling they don't get a fair shake.
Well, the
Now-
first thing is that we recognize who young people are. They have an adolescent brain that isn't fully developed till they're 25 years old. They act impulsively, but it's based upon mistakes. It's not necessarily about being bad or being ill-willed. So the first thing is to expose them to positive things, not bring them into the criminal justice system. I have experience with a lot of programming that way, where pre-arraignment or pre-coming into court, they can meet with other young people who've been involved in similar situations. They express themselves through artwork. They express themselves mutually with each other and develop friendships and support groups that stand them in good stead. It's having programming. For example, the Red Hook Community Justice Center, which was one of my programs, you can walk in the front door there. You don't have to have a case in order to get educational help, tutoring after school, vocational help. You can take photography courses. It's a justice center. It's not just a court. Now, some people who are in court get referred that way, but you don't have to go in through that door in order to get the services there. It's a great model for a lot of community justice.
But there's a feeling that the criminal justice system is broken. Can you speak to that?
Well, it is broken. I mean, if you just looking at the disproportionate number of African American and Latinos who are in jail speaks to how broken it is, because it's become a place for poor, addicted, for people who have mental health issues. The criminal justice system has become a place to put people so we can hide them from society and not deal with our problems, which is sort of the lack of social services, the lack of quality education, the lack of communities that have organizations to work with young people. You know, I am a firm believer that the district attorney has to align herself with community-based organizations that are working to prevent crime, working with young people. And even those young people who have committed crimes still have a place to go, and we need to work with them as well. And that's what I would continue, because the community knows what they need. We have to help them get what they need and work with them in those resources.
Mark.
I was struck with...
Pat said, help herself.
Hey! I love that the use of that phrase, and I'm thrilled that I'm surrounded by two very, very articulate and brilliant women. I just feel like I have a very specific vision, and that's why I'm doing this.
And what is your vision?
Well, my vision is that in addition to fixing those problems that I mentioned, the three that are of concern to me, that we do revamp the system, but I really want to pick up on what you're talking about in terms of the young people. The DA's office right now is not engaged with the community. I hear it all the time. In fact, 10 years ago, there was more engagement with the community. Young people, I think, for all of us on this panel, are a great priority. They're our future, let's face it. And it's not just that their futures impact on them, they impact on all of us. And those of us who care about them are trying to help them grow in a safe environment. I have two programs that I'm thrilled about. One of them is the DA's Council on Civil Rights Matters, where I'm going to have kids from high schools, completely different high schools, kids that never would have been in the same room together before. A yeshiva school, a Muslim-based school, the Hetrick Martin School where the LGBT kids go, and get together and come up with a curriculum to take back to their schools to say, what is the profile of the next great civil rights leader? By engaging the young people like that, I've got a middle school program too that I'll tell you about another time, we get rid of that stigma, the us versus them. The DA's office is this place that I don't understand, that I'm not a part of.
We're running out of time, unfortunately. 30 seconds each. Why should we vote for you? And we begin with you.
Thank you. You should vote for me because not only do I talk about reform, I know how to implement reform. I've done a lot of programming to begin with, and I know what the future needs. The future needs better programming with sex trafficking, better prosecution with sex trafficking. It needs systems to avoid wrongful convictions in the first place. I have a lot of ideas about how to do that. Systems to ensure that assistants act in a highly ethical manner so that we can have confidence in the system, that people will want to participate and want to engage. And the first step is for them voting for Brooklyn District Attorney, and I hope that they vote for me.
Pat.
Well, I tell everyone, I have the experience. I have experience on both sides. I have the civil rights experience and I have the prosecutorial experience and perspective, and experience matter. And this is a 1,200 person office and $94 million budget. So we also have to know how to manage individuals so that the vision can actually be enhanced and that the vision can take place. Because if 1,200 people aren't on board with it, then you're not going to be able to implement all the programs and all the things that you want to do. And so management experience counts. And I'm the only candidate that's run a city agency and run a city agency for a long time, who created all of the programs and brought a dead civil rights agency to life here in New York. And so on September 12th, I'm hoping that they will vote for me, and I'm sure that they will, and I'll be the next district attorney in Brooklyn.
Mark, you've got even less than 30 seconds.
All right.
I'm sorry.
We all have policy and management experience, but I am a fighter, and I have fought my whole career for the rights of victims and actually the constitutional rights of the defendants, and I will fight for the folks in Brooklyn right now. Stepped away from the office because I saw that there were fundamental wrongs, and I didn't have a big plan. I simply had the plan to get the word out. The system is broken. It can be changed. This is the place to do it. Now is the time.
Thank you, Mark Fleidner, Pat Gatling, and Ann Swern. Brooklyn Television and Internet viewers will have seen you, and they'll get the opportunity to see you again several times because we'll be airing this program and repeating this program again. In the meantime, viewers can also watch this program on our Brooklyn 45 TV YouTube channel, and we'd love for you to go to our Brooklyn 45 Facebook page and post your comments. Again, if you know a middle school or high school student who has an average of 90 or above and you'd like us to feature him or her on Brooklyn 45, go to our Facebook page and message us or email us at info@brooklyn45.com. On behalf of our entire Brooklyn 45 production team, thank you for watching our program. Remember, go out and vote.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.